Not so long ago, my eldest son asked me if he could borrow my laptop computer, and I looked at him and I said, can I trust you with it? And he gave me his favorite argument, which is basically this: Dad. And I said, yeah, sure, you can have it. And then he took my laptop computer and he fiddled around with it for a bit. And when he brought it back to me, he was telling me what he did with it. And he was holding it rather loosely in his hands. And it slipped from his hands, and the computer fell onto the floor. The screen broke, and the thing is entirely useless now. So I trusted him. And by trusting him, I made myself vulnerable to what actually happened. And this is an essential feature, I think, of trust. It is this: trust implies vulnerability. So in this case, vulnerability to what actually happened. But in general, trusting people, trusting things, trusting organizations implies making oneself vulnerable to deception, betrayal, and all sorts of disappointment. Now, the question I would like to ask is, why do we make ourselves vulnerable voluntarily by trusting? And I would like to ask this question at a sort of very day-to-day basic level of everyday experience. So why is it rational for us to trust other people, to trust things and organizations, and thereby to make ourselves vulnerable to betrayal and deception? But I would also like to ask this question at a sort of bigger picture level of human evolution. Why did we evolve into beings that make themselves vulnerable to betrayal, deception, disappointment, and all sorts of other nasty things? And I think that the answer to this question, in order to answer it, we should basically start to ask what it is that we're doing, mentally speaking, cognitively speaking, when we trust people, things, organizations. And I think the answer, if you look at it from a sort of cognitive point of view, the answer is basically this: we're doing nothing when we trust. So I'll give you an example. I take it that all of you are actually trusting the seats that you're sitting on. Meaning that you don't expect your seats to give way under you, right? So you expect them to be sort of solid enough and safely constructed. But what did your trusting consist in? Up until now, at least. Up until now, it consisted in the fact that you didn't give it any thought. You didn't think about your chair or whether it's safely constructed. And that goes for trust in general. So if I trust a friend with a promise he makes, or if I trust an organization, if I trust the fact that the political system will probably not collapse now, today, that a plane will not crash into this building, that basically means that I'm not thinking about all these nasty things. So if trusting consists in not consciously thinking, not consciously worrying about items, then the question becomes, what is so good about not thinking? What is so good? What do we gain from not thinking, not worrying about all sorts of things? Well, here's one thing. There are some things that we really do better without thinking. So these people over here, they're engaged in activities that they really do better without consciously thinking about what it is that they're doing. So they trust their own, in this case, their own embodied, automated skills. And that's all for the better, because if they start thinking about what they do, if they start controlling their actions consciously, things will probably go wrong. So this is an important thing about not thinking. This is an important thing that we gain from it. It's a kind of freedom, a kind of flow. But I think that the really important thing about not worrying whether or not the floor will give way under me, or whether the political system will collapse, or whether a friend will keep a promise, or whether a seat will collapse, not worrying about those things, the really important thing about that is that we leave room in our heads to think about the things that are really important for us to think about, right? Now this sounds very trivial, and it is trivial, but it's still a very big deal. And it's a big deal because conscious thought is a kind of cognitive capital. We can do wondrous things with it. We can plan ahead. We can imagine future scenarios. We can solve very complex problems with conscious thought. So it's very important to us, and we can do wondrous things with it. But, and this is crucial, it takes a lot of neural computation, and therefore a lot of energy. And that basically means that we only have so much of it. We can't keep on spending our cognitive capital on just about everything. We have to really be picky about what we think about consciously. And here's the thing. Trust allows us to be economic with our cognitive capital. I'll give you an example. When I take the train to Amsterdam, I step into the train, and when I do so, I don't worry about whether or not the carriage I step into is safely constructed. I could worry about that, but I don't. I mean, it's not my job to worry about that. It's the job of engineers and mechanics to worry about whether or not the train is safe, and I trust them. It's their cognitive labor that has been put in the train, and I trust them. So that leaves me room to think about what's important for me to think about. So what I do when I enter the train is I sit down, I open my laptop computer, and I start preparing my classes. Now, the mechanic, say, might have a daughter who's actually studying philosophy at the Radboud University in Nijmegen, and she takes her classes with me. And while he's constructing his trains, he could worry about whether or not his daughter gets a proper education, but he doesn't. He keeps his mind on the trains, and he trusts me in that. So this is the thing. Trust allows for a very specific kind of division of labor, namely a division of conscious cognitive labor. And as you can see from the very simple example I just gave, you can extrapolate from that, and you can easily see that trust is a condition for, and an enabling condition for our very complex human societies, in which everyone does their own thing and basically trusts others with their own thing. And if you agree with me that the ability to build and sustain complex societies is one of the major features of the evolutionary success of humans, then you would agree with me that trust is one of the key features behind our evolutionary success. And that, I submit, is why we cultivate trust. That is why we do not only teach our children to be vigilant, but we also teach them to be trustworthy agents and to be able to trust themselves. This is something we teach them really without thinking about it a lot. So we even trust ourselves in cultivating their trust. But we should also remind ourselves that we should be able to trust, and we should sort of cultivate our own ability to trust. And that, I think, is why when my eldest son comes to me and asks me, "Dad, can I borrow your new laptop computer?" it is my job to say, "Yeah, sure you can." Thank you very much.